Daniel is a friend. He's been living here in Fruita for the last few years, and he was the subject a few years ago of the book by Mark Sundin, The Man Who Quit Money, and I'll let Daniel say most of the stuff. What I've come to think about Daniel is whether you agree or disagree with him, he's lived a courageous life, and it's a privilege to have you here, Daniel. So why don't you take it away? Thank
you. Thanks, Danny. And thanks for coming, everyone. And also, there's food in the back that my friends Alex and Rudy and Max, I don't know if Rudy and Max are here, but they helped me retrieve it, and it's free. So basically, if you don't know, I gave up money in 2000 and was living basically outdoors with some house sitting here and there, mostly in the Utah wilderness, but also I hitchhiked around the United States lots over those years, and it's magical. And something that I noticed, that everyone that I've met on the road that has lived a similar lifestyle, they all have a certain mysticism. Like, there's a certain knowledge that you gain of what goes around comes around, and things come when you need them. And that doesn't necessarily always mean positive things either. Trials and hardships and amazing blessings, they all come. And it's quite magical. But 2 years ago, I kind of had to put this lifestyle on hold to help my parents out. My dad passed away a year ago from cancer, and I'm still with my mom. And through these past couple of years, I've been pretty much stuck inside four walls, and I've gone inward a lot, and it's given me a chance to mull over everything I've learned in the past decade and a half before that. And this is what I would like to share tonight. But also something else I would like to point out is, I think it's good for us to walk away from things that we feel we need to walk away from, things that bother us. But something that I've learned being back is you can't ever really walk away permanently from anything until you've learned your lesson from it. So it's like I'm at the point now where I'm refacing living with the bureaucracy and everything else that comes with coming back home and being with my mom and my dad before he passed away, and family and friends, and I think what's good is it is good to walk away from things you feel like you need to walk away from, but they will come back, and they'll come back amplified even more than before. But in the meantime, you learn these tools to deal with them again, and our teachers keep coming back until we learn our lesson. And I think that's where I'm at now. But I'm calling this the physics and spirituality of gift economy. And I get really excited about this stuff, and I kind of believe that you might hear things that you've never heard before. Unless I kind of feel like nothing comes from us individually. I would say it comes from God. It comes from and I imagine these same concepts are arising everywhere else. They don't come from me. But when the time is right, they blossom. And this is kind of a blossoming that I'm experiencing and that I would like to share with everyone. When I was on the road, when I first gave up money, it was really difficult because I've always been in the giving position. And that's kind of the way we're raised in a Christian culture, that you want to be the giver. It's more blessed to give than receive. But I found that I was very often, I was dependent upon the gifts of others, dependent on other people's generosity and the gifts of the universe. And there's something very humbling about being on the receiving end. And I would be hitchhiking, and sometimes people would pick me up, and they have ideas like, well, I'm going to get my reward, and they will say what goes around comes around. And there's other people that it seemed like they didn't have any conception that they were doing anything good. It was like something fun to pick up a hitchhiker. And I kind of appreciated that more. It didn't feel like I was a charity case. And it was very difficult for me to accept gifts in the beginning. And then I thought back of the times when I was the giver, and I'd be angry if somebody was like, no, I don't, like put on this false humility. Oh, you don't have to do that. It's like it's denying me a joy of giving. And I realized, put away the nonsense. Like people would say, well, are you hungry? And I'm like starving. And I'd say, no, I'm all right. And then I realized, oh yeah, this is where I'm at. I am dependent on people's generosity. I have to get over this pride. My false humility was pride because I couldn't be honest. I finally got to the point where I'd say, yes, I'm hungry. And I could just see their face beaming when I was honest. It's like I am denying their joy by being too proud to take gifts. And then after hitchhiking, I don't know how many times people would thank me. And I was like, you're thanking me? And I started realizing something. And this is a principle, and I feel like it's the principle of all of life. And this is going to be the main concept of this talk. So your hand, when your right hand is pulling out a thorn from your left foot, does the hand expect credit? Does the foot feel debt? And I feel like this is the principle of all of life. And we've skewed this to where we feel credit and debt. We want credit when we do something good, and we feel debt when we're in the receiving position. And both of those are a construct of our civilization, our money system. And this is my little outline of what I'm going through. Commerce tries to replace two economic laws which already govern the physical universe. Everything is already paid for. This sounds like a mystical concept right now, but I want to demonstrate it. Yet there's two things at play here. Everything is already paid for, yet there is also delayed reward. What goes around comes around. And the third is both of the above laws are really one law. And there are two credit debt creeds that block our awareness of these truths, yet point to these truths at the same time. The creed of money and the creed of religion. And this is what want to demonstrate that both money and religion are belief systems. Belief systems aren't necessarily bad, but they can become that. And then I've been realizing that you can boil down all the conflicts of religion and politics between two things: justice and grace. Each one feels like it's moral superiority, justice and grace. Justice is deserved law, it's trade, credit, and debt. And usually those who hold justice envision an angry God. And then there's grace, unmerited favor, forgiveness, gift economy. And here's where we envision, like in the Christian tradition, like the Madonna and Child, Mary and Jesus, and grace. Whoops, I'm going ahead. But think about it. This is how our politics divides our political parties. We've got one that's saying we have too much lenience. We have too much grace. We need more justice. The other party is we're saying we have too much justice. We need more grace. We have too much. And you notice they kind of come together. Trade, economy, credit and debt, greater military, greater prison system. We want more justice because too many people are getting by with too much. And then the other side, grace. No, we need a more forgiving society, and we need more giving freely. We need to get away more from this credit and debt thing. And I've studied religions for many years, and I've noticed the same pattern happens in religion. This is what happened in the Reformation. At that time, the Catholic Church was really into justice and commerce and selling indulgences to get into heaven, and punishment, inquisitions. And the Reformation this was Martin Luther's big epiphany, was wait, salvation is by grace, not working, not all this punishment and constant beating yourself down to get into heaven. It's grace. And grace itself, the word grace means gratis. Gracious and gratitude, they all come from the same root. But this is not discounting justice, and I want to show how grace and justice are one single thing. But I've noticed the same pattern happens in other religions. This is the whole debate in the Bhagavad Gita in Hinduism. The Bhagavad Gita is a debate between grace and works, grace and justice. There's karmic law. If you work hard enough, you'll be able to reincarnate into a higher level. But then there's this sort of what looks like a new idea. Well, grace. It's like with devotion and putting your mind in the present, you transcend the cycles of credit and debt. Or in Eastern philosophy, it's like reincarnation or karma. And same with Buddhism. Buddhism was the same thing. The Buddha was reacting to a system of too much justice, too much emphasis on karmic cycles. And we can transcend that. And that was the old Hinduism. And the Bhagavad Gita is also a reaction against the old Hinduism. And Martin Luther was a reaction against the old, what Christianity had become. Jesus was a reaction against the the hardcore legalism of Judaism. And he was bringing out the concepts of grace that were already there. And it's almost like Catholicism and Protestantism have switched roles again. It's like there's a hard emphasis on legalism and hardcore justice. Pretty much for everybody else, but for ourselves, grace. And that's kind of that's the catch. So anyway, everything is already instantaneously paid for. So how is this? I kind of was showing that with the body when you pick a thorn from your foot. Who's getting the credit and who's getting the debt? But let's look at physics. You reap what you sow instantaneously. So I'll say instantaneously. This is Isaac Newton's theorem. To every action, there's always opposed and equal reaction, or the mutual actions of two bodies upon each other are always equal and directed to contrary parts. Perfect justice is the law of physics. There we go. Perfect justice is already happening. Like, it is happening every single moment, every single action, every particle in this universe takes, it gets an equal and opposite payment. So really, there's no such thing as debt. Everything is paid for right in the moment. And we look at this as physics, but I say that everything follows this law, including our social reactions, everything we do. And we know exactly when we're doing something harmful. When it harms myself, it's going to harm someone else because there's no separation between me and the rest of the universe. Everything is completely interconnected. And we're in a society where we believe that payment is delayed. And we've lost touch with knowing ourselves. Like, this is called conscience. That's all this is. This is our conscience. It's like when I do something, when I know that it's not truthful or harmful, and I do it anyway, I immediately suffer the consequences in my psyche. We all know this, but we cover it up. And it's the cover-up it's got our whole society playing games. So here's the second part, delayed payment. What goes around comes around. So you see this in the cycles of nature. Okay, you've got trees, plants. The deer eats the trees, or the fruit, or the grass. And then the deer poops that out, and it becomes food for organisms in the soil, mushrooms. And also he poops out seeds, which might become more plants. And the deer is inadvertently continuing the cycles. He has no conception that he doesn't have a sense of debt, like, oh, I owe something back to the grass because I ate it. There's no conception of debt. That's a human construct that we've created, the concept of debt. And then the deer has no concept of credit. The deer doesn't think, oh, I'm doing such good for the organisms in the soil, and I'm doing such good, I'm propagating trees and grass for life. And every step of the way this happens. It's a pay-it-forward system. And there's a delayed response too. And what goes around comes around, and the deer finally gets what it needs back again. How does this happen? Is there an accountant sitting there thinking, well, how's this deer going to get paid back? Let's write this in a ledger. Let's set up a bank account. See, the idea is that the big the banker is in the sky, or is the universe. And this is the original concept of God. Like the idea of, in our own tradition, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. That's basically the law of physics speaking. Everything is paid for automatically. Don't worry about it. I will take care of credit and debt, says the universe. I will take care of vengeance and payback, or whatever you've got in your minds. Don't worry about it. So this is the concept of faith. And then you look at the sun. The sun is providing all of the energy for this, like all of it. The sun is what's providing the energy to run this computer and our bodies and these lights. And think about it. What do we owe back to the sun? Can you even pay back the sun if you wanted to? Like, think about that. It's complete grace. It's unmerited favor. And this is a concept in the teachings of Jesus. Do good, love your enemies. Do good to those who might do bad to you. Because you'll be like God, who sends sun and rain on the just and on the unjust. The sun doesn't sit down and say with you and go through your life history and say, well, we need to find out if you're approved for this credit, for this social aid you're going to get. Now, the sun will equally shine on Adolf Hitler as it will Gandhi or whoever, the just and the unjust. The sun enables, and we're so afraid of enabling. Like, well, we don't want to enable bad behavior. The sun is enabling Adolf Hitler, and the sun is enabling Jesus Christ or whoever. The sun is enabling you. The sun is enabling your abusive spouse or parents or whatever. But the sun also, it's running out like everything else. There's nothing that's permanent. The sun also follows cycles and on into the galaxies. So my question is, what if justice and grace are one thing? So I was just showing you the cycles of life, and this blue one is how we envision it. We see it as one process going forward, around and around, and eventually we get back what we need. And this is how we envision the world with our money minds. This is how we've been raised to think. And it's a partial truth. See, this is the dominant possessive provider. And the repayment is delayed. But since in the natural cycles it's a pay it forward, where we don't see that there's a mutual exchange, then this is how we create our system. Well, we need to set up a system where people will pay us back for our services. This isn't the way nature's set up, but nature's unfair because this is all we see, going in a circle. But this is what I've realized on the road, accepting charity. There's an equal and opposite circle going this way. See, in our system, we consider it domesticated, recessive, receiver. And you'll notice there's an obvious male and female thing going on here. The giver and the receiver. And the receptive we tend to, in our thinking, we tend to look down on the receptive. because we're the giver. We don't recognize the equal and opposite gift that's being given back to us by the receptive. And this is more the model of reality right here. Whoops. Both are happening simultaneously, the equal and opposite circle. So if we go back to this, there's an equal and opposite direction that giving is happening, but we don't recognize it because it's recessive. There's a blessing, an equal blessing going exactly the same way. And I feel like that's illustrated right here like you see this all over nature. You've got worlds going both directions. But we only recognize one because it's dominant. See there, isn't that beautiful? That's the same principle. So both of these laws are really one. When your right hand pulls a thorn from your left foot, does the hand expect credit? Does the foot feel debt? Is the hand selfless or selfish? Like even those words have no more meaning. When we realize that there's total oneness of everything, there's not a single particle in this universe that can exist independently by itself. I am the accumulation of the whole universe, and so are you. Like, where does me start and you end? Where's the line of division? And this is what we see right here. There's something going around in a circle. The hand helps the foot, and the hand will eventually receive a reward in the pay it forward system, but at the same time, both are receiving the same reward exactly at the same time. It's one thing. Okay, I was just talking about the sun. This is something that Rumi said, I don't know, I think he was 1,000 years ago or something. He said, he was a poet, a Sufi poet. He said, and still after all this time, the sun has never said to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with love like that. It lights up the sky. That's the gift economy of all the energy powering your life. And we've somehow grabbed a hold of this energy and took it into possession. Now we say, you owe me. Now you have to pay your bills. The gift economy of all the air you breathe. And we don't stop to think about this. The atmosphere is 100% communal. One breath enabling both the just and the unjust. Here's the logical conclusion of privatized air. Is this what we want? There's privatized air, and this is the world. Is this the kind of world we want to create? Now we're going to get into the first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. So when you look at it this way, nothing is lost in the universe. We're always so worried about loss of energy, but when our consciousness and our mind is on the whole rather than just ourselves, we realize that benefit to the whole is benefit to me is benefit to the whole, including my loss of energy to another component in the universe. It's life and death. It's inevitable. And this is a concept that I'm always hearing. It's usually by kind of new agey types. They'll say money is energy. But you think about it. I thought about this a lot. These two are, it's not true. Money is not energy. Money is created and destroyed out of thin air. Energy is not. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. Money is a belief in the head. Money is a symbol of energy. Money is not energy. And I feel like this idea is what's destroying our world. It's our mistaking the symbol for the reality. Money is not a material substance. Money is a belief in the head shared by two or more people. Money is not coins. Money is not gold. Money is not anything but a belief in the head. And we impose this belief on objects like coins or blips in a computer or in a bank. Money is a creed, and religion is a creed. Why do I say money is a creed? Money is credit. Look at the root meaning of credit. Belief, trust. Credibility, incredible, it means belief. That's what credit is. Credit is a belief in our head. It's not an actual substance. Now, idolatry. I've got the golden calf here. Whoops. Idolatry is mistaking the symbol for what it symbolizes. I don't think there's anything wrong with a golden calf until you think that it's the source of your power. Idolatry is mistaking the symbol for what it symbolizes. Idolatry sacrifices the actual to the symbol, the real to the illusion. One time I was with some friends in Portland and they wanted to burn a $5 bill we'd found. They were traveling moneyless with me for a while. So I said, okay. So we went downtown and we were standing next to a coffee stand and burned this $5 bill. And people were irate. They were like, think of what you could, somebody said, you're burning a latte there. That was about the price of a latte. And I said, no, look, the latte is still there. The bill is burned. And for years I've lived off of the throwaway of our society. No one blinks an eye at the masses and masses and masses of food being thrown away every day. You could feed the whole world on what this country alone throws away. That is real. That is actual things being sacrificed to a symbol. Why don't we get angry at that? And the reason we are throwing away so much is for this symbol. This is behind our wars. This is behind the divisions in our politics. And there's something that some of you might be familiar with. Charles Eisenstein. He writes a lot about gift economy. Something that he said was, why would somebody overfish? I'm always hearing this argument of, well, we need money because somebody's going to take more than they need, and we need to. I say it's the opposite. It's like you look at a moneyless society, like a hunting and gathering society. Why don't they take more than they need? Why do they share everything? Why do they need these little tabulations to make sure everybody gets a fair share? Why don't they need that? Why is it that somebody would overfish? It's because profit. Like I experimented with this. I went fishing for a summer up in Alaska, and I decided I wouldn't take money doing that. But I saw what happened. The fish, we no longer saw the fish as living beings. They were dollars. And we wanted to get as many as we possibly could. And the fish were being shipped to Japan because there's high demand for fish in Japan. But if you're just fishing for your village or your family, why on earth would you take more than you need? Think about it. It makes no sense. Do you want a rotting pile of fish? Every creed, good or bad, is based on at least a facsimile of truth. The system we have created is an artifice. The artificial imitates the actual. Can we find the actual the artifice is based upon? So this is where like a few years ago, all of a sudden I was thinking the truth was hitting me. There is a system in nature of investment and repayment, and even interest. Like life multiplies. You invest it and it multiplies. And I didn't want to think about this because it's like in my mind, it's like money bad, all interest, like all these economic principles, they're bad. Let's just get rid of them. But they're actually based on truths, and we've imitated those truths, and now we believe the imitation is the truth. This further demonstrates if credit is belief in the head, debt is also a belief in the head. Look at this, all these countries in debt. The United States is trillions in debt. Russia's one of the lowest debts, but it's $151.3 billion in debt. It goes on and on. Total Earth debt, $233.3 trillion. Who's the debt for? Who do we owe? Where everybody's owing everyone else. But you step back and you see how all of a sudden you realize this is a mass mental illness. Who are we in debt to? When you erase money and look at goods and services, you see the truth. You see, we put so much stock in this belief. And this is what this guy Jacques Fresco, he's like, I think he's maybe my mom's age, or maybe mid-80s, I don't know. But he started what's called the Venus Project. I don't know a whole lot about it, but he envisions a moneyless world, and there's a lot of things of the Venus Project that sort of rub me the wrong way, but the principles are there. And he said he witnessed the Depression, and he said, you know, back in the Depression, all of a sudden I realized nothing has changed physically, but all of a sudden we're poor. Like the United States is still producing more than any country in the world. So what happened? Numbers changed, that's it. There was the Dust Bowl. That was one thing that's physical, but even the Dust Bowl was created by over-farming to pay bills to banks. Basically, the problems in our world, in our society, are we are enslaved to our beliefs. And that's what I'm wanting to show with this credit and debt system. Where does the word money come from? Okay, I really want to show here, money is a religion. Moneda, that was the goddess Juno Moneda. She was a Roman goddess, and at the very center of Rome was her temple, the temple of Juno Moneda, and it was the mint. That's where our word mint comes from, Moneda, the goddess Moneda, money. This was her temple, and this is the temple today. You can see that it has the ruins here, and there's a church built on its grounds, the Church of Santa Maria in Araceli in Rome. This is the coin, moneda. This is the first money. Well, there were coins before this, but this is the first time it was called money, monetary, moneda. And it was considered sacred, so it was minted right in the temple. Temples of credit. Has anybody ever noticed how our banks and our churches are looking more and more alike? And look, This looks a lot like Temple Moneda. See? Temple Moneda. And this church is kind of funny. It's actually called Red Bank Baptist Church. This is the Colonial Bank right here. This is not a church. And look at our temples of commerce. Here's our Mesa Mall here in Grand Junction. These are mega churches. I don't know where they are. I think the one's in Houston. Mercury, the Roman god Mercury. Our words merchandise, Mercury and merchandise and market are all from the same root. Mercury is the god of tradesmen and thieves. I feel like our dollar sign even has something to do with that. Now let's look at, I feel like this is the religion that's got us gripped in this culture. It's the religious dogma of the invisible hand of the free market. This is becoming, we have higher devotion to this, even in self-proclaimed Christianity. This supersedes all. We manipulate our religion to revolve around this. Adam Smith first came up with this idea of the invisible hand of the free market. He said, in spite of their natural selfishness and rapacity, business people are led by an invisible hand, and thus, without intending it, without knowing it, advance the interest of the society. This actually is based on some profound truths, and I've just been talking about them. What is self-interest and what's interest of the whole? Like, what is the difference between the self and the whole? And these are ideas that Ayn Rand and Milton Friedman have picked up on. And this has gotten a grip on our culture. Because it is based on a truth, I can see how this appeals to us. Like we think, well, if you just let business go, it will morally smooth itself out and everything will be fine. Ideally, that sounds great, but there's no examples of it anywhere. I keep asking people, where are examples of a free market anywhere in the world? Can anybody really say there's ever a free market? Gift economy is the only laissez-faire economy. Laissez-faire means let it be. It's French. This is the philosophy of free market. But I will dare say there is no such thing as a free market. Free market is an oxymoron. Like a market is where you pay for things. It's where you own things. What you own is not free. That's the definition of not free. Owned. Under possession. Privatized means it's mine. It's not yours. Privatized means not free. It's under dictatorship. It is under your dictatorship. This is feudalism. This is what our ancestors worked so hard to get away from, was feudalism, where let's just privatize everything until one person owns all the land and everybody has to be a serf on that land. And of course, the one who owns believes in the free market. You'll notice that this is most popular philosophy among the most wealthy in the world, like the Koch brothers. They love free market philosophy because they don't want control for themselves, but they want control for everyone else. They want to manipulate. And this doesn't matter whether you're liberal or conservative. People that own love this philosophy because they don't want control over themselves. They don't want control by the people. They want some mysterious invisible hand to make it all morally correct. Free market dogma is based upon the actual principle of free economy. This is why it's appealing. Again, here's the logical conclusion of privatization. What happens if we privatize all of the air, or all of the water, or all of the land? This is what the Native Americans were trying to pound into our heads. Why do you keep saying you're free when you want to privatize? You want to own everything. And anybody who doesn't own, you oppress them or kill them. This is the Roman Empire. This has been happening, actually it's been happening since ancient Sumer. It's not just here. Again, is the hand selfish or selfless? What we want to do is we want to privatize the hand. So there's two different kinds of selfishness here. And what appeals to us is the idea that, okay, if I help myself, I'm going to help the other. And that's true. If I help the other, I'm going to help myself. But we want to cut the hand off from the body altogether. And that's selfishness gone awry. The hand that wants to think, I'm independent of the body. So what if we extend this to the whole universe? The universe means, it's from the Latin, unus versus. One turning, one winding, one current. There's one and no other. Is there any particle in this universe that can exist independently? Isn't each particle, isn't each person the product of the whole universe? What if we reimagine our idea of God to mean the whole, rather than separate? And this is a core principle that's lost in our modern theologies. The idea of oneness with God, or God within you. Now let's look at the word praise. Now we're getting into the religion part more. Praise means to laud, commend, flatter. To praise, value. From the Latin preciare, which means price. This is the online etymological dictionary. You can find amazing things with it. Only in the English is it differentiated in form from cognate price. So in English, price and praise are two different words. But in other languages, they're the same word. I give you price, I give you praise. Now we think about this, we're getting somewhere. Praise to the hand or praise to the whole? Does the hand expect praise? Does it expect credit? Credit is praise. Price. Does the foot feel debt or guilt? Guilt is the opposite, debt. Debt and guilt are the same thing. Our civilization is running on credit and debt, praise and guilt. We love praise. This is what Jesus talked about. You love the honor of people. You love the praise of people. And this is a concept I find in all the ancient religions. It's the same concept. So how about if we switch the word God for whole? All credit to the whole. All praise, all price to the whole. All praise to the whole. Whole equals health, equals holistic, and our word holy comes from whole. Be holy, be whole, be health, be holistic. It's hallelujah. It's the Hebrew. No body part can truly take credit, price, praise for anything because no body part exists apart from the whole. Just think of the whole universe as one body. Scientifically, it is. There's nothing that can exist separate. This is what the delusion we've created for ourselves. This is what the Native Americans kept trying to pound into us. Whoops. With all things and in all things, we are relatives. The Sioux are saying that all the time, the Lakota. Mitakuai Oyasin. I never can pronounce that right, but that means all my relatives. One atmosphere, one breath, one spirit, one self. This is from the Bible, Ecclesiastes, and it's amazing. You never hear this. It's kind of shied away from it. Solomon is the said writer of Ecclesiastes. As I said in my heart, concerning the condition of the children of men, God tests them that they may see that they themselves are animals. For what happens to the children of men also happens to animals. One thing befalls them. As one dies, so dies the other. Surely they all have one breath. Man has no advantage over animals, for all is emptiness. Every single English translation adds like there, or like animals. It's in italics in a lot of, because it's added, because we can't handle that idea. It goes against what we've been taught all our lives, especially in our faith. They all have one breath. This word breath is ruach in Hebrew, and it means air, it means breath, and it means spirit. Ruach is the name of the Holy Spirit. I think it's Kadish Ruach is Holy Spirit. One breath. All life is one breath. It's scientific. We're all sharing one atmosphere. Where does my breath start and yours end? And this concept is in Hinduism. It's called the Atman. The Sanskrit word for Atman means breath. And this kind of, but it's all, in English translations of Hindu scriptures, it's usually translated as soul or self, rather than breath. Just like we translate it as spirit, when in the original it means breath or air in Hebrew and in Greek. Or spirit itself, like respire, means breath. Inspire, breathe in. One atmosphere, one breath, one spirit, one self. Now here's Augustine. This will surprise a lot of Christians today, and you'll wonder if this is even the same religion as it was in the beginning. Augustine said this as well as, like, unanimously the church leaders in the early Christianity said the same things about possession and money and common property. Augustine I like because he's equally revered by both Protestants and Catholics. Those who wish to make room for the Lord must find pleasure not in private but in common property. Redouble your charity. For on account of the things which each one of us possesses singly, wars exist, hatreds, discord, strifes among human beings, tumults, dissensions, scandals, sins, injustices, murders, on one account. On account of those things which each of us possesses singly. Do we fight over the things we possess in common? Here it is. We inhale this air in common with others. We all see the sun in common. Blessed, therefore, are those who make room for the Lord. And so forth. And if you look up, like, all of the major ones said the same, similar things. Augustine and Tertullian, Ambrose, the list goes on and on. Every single one of them, you can find quotes like this. And the Romans even said this about the early Christians, that they didn't like possessions and they lived communally. And this was the main reason they were persecuted. So here's this Atman thing again in Hinduism. The person equipped with yoga looks on all with an impartial eye, seeing Atman, or breath, in all beings and all beings in Atman. He who sees me everywhere and everything in me never vanishes from me, nor I him. The Quran, you were created as but one soul, and as one soul you shall be raised to life. God hears all and sees all. If you give up your idea of God being a separate man in the sky, all of a sudden you realize, well, of course, the whole is omnipresent. How could it not be? The universe is omnipresent. The whole is personal. My person is part of the universe. Therefore, the universe is personal. It's impersonal too. Everything you can think of that's in the universe is a characteristic of, you could say, God, or the whole. The Quran says, he who gives away his wealth and who gives no favor to anyone for the sake of reward, but only craving the face of his Lord Most High, in the end he shall be well pleased. This concept is over and over in the Quran. It's over and over in the Bhagavad Gita. A person of yoga attains everlasting peace by abandoning the root rewards of action. Selfishly attached to reward, he remains bound. The Tao Te Ching, Chinese. Lao Tzu said, creating without claiming, doing without taking credit, guiding without interfering. This is the primal virtue. These are just universal truths that people are seeing and proclaiming what they see. Buddhism, enlightened beings are magnanimous givers, bestowing whatever they have with equanimity, without regret, without hoping for reward, without seeking honor, without coveting material benefits, but only to rescue and safeguard all living beings. There we go, the whole. It's like when your mind is constantly on the whole. Is this good for the whole? If it's good for the whole, it's good for me and it's good for you. The left hand does unto the right hand as it does unto itself. Reality recognizes no self and other. Now we're getting to the golden rule. The golden rule. This is another thing. We think of the golden rule as a commandment. It's not. All of a sudden I realized it's a statement. Every single creature in the universe follows the golden rule. Put away the idea that this is a commandment. Like love cannot be commanded. If it can be commanded, it's not love. You always do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If I'm bad, if I'm mean, cruel, I do unto others as I would have them do unto me. If I'm loving, I do unto them as I would have them do unto me. You always love your neighbor as you love yourself. If you love yourself a lot, you love your neighbor a lot. If you love your neighbor a lot, you love yourself a lot. It's basically the law of physics. Every particle in the universe follows this law, as all is the law of physics. For every action, there is an equal reaction. I even looked it up in the Hebrew and realized it's not imperative tense. All these years or centuries we thought this was imperative, that it's a command. It's just a simple statement. You love your neighbor as yourself. We all do. This is a Zen concept. In the world of reality, there is no self, there is no other than self. Martin Luther King said the same thing. I cannot reach fulfillment without thou. The self cannot be self without other selves. Self-concern without other concern is like a tributary that has no outward flow to the ocean. Okay, the last part, I don't even know what time it is. Usury and interest. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Baha'i, Rastafarianism, and the Greek sages all denounce charging interest. I had a whole list of them that I was going to show, but it's too much. But I've got them listed on my website. Many ancients considered a crime worse than murder, charging interest. Imagine that. However, even usury is also based upon life's basic laws. This is what I was getting to before. In physics, the second law of thermodynamics, paying forward interest paid through time. In an isolated system, entropy can only increase. So usury, that's what it means. It's use. Things wear out with use. So everything you do, you pay interest. And somebody else gains interest. One animal eats another one. One loses, one gains. It's paying and giving interest. So then you ask, well, what's the problem with interest? Again, we're getting back to we're mistaking the symbol for the reality. We're charging interest on symbols. We're having people who contribute nothing to society who are collecting symbols. This is the way the banking system works. Say you come to me and I don't have any money, but I have access to a checkbook. And you say, I want to borrow some money. And I say, okay. And I write you a check. And it's a bad check. And you go and buy your house with it. Did I lend you anything? Do you owe me anything? And then I say, well, pay me back with interest. This is basically how banking works. That's the simplest way you can describe banking. We're borrowing bad checks. And then we're made to feel like we need to pay back what was never lent to us in the first place. It's called fiat money. But in reality, I would say all money is fiat money. And I'm not saying it's necessarily evil, but it's because it's like words that are meaningless. They become lies. So we have interest. Things are losing energy and gaining energy through this cycle. And it happens in both directions. And here's where the idea of interest came from. Cattle. The word cattle comes from the French châtel, means property or wealth or money. And it's the same idea of fee or pecuniary. Those also come from the word cattle. You can see that our ancestors, that was probably their first money, was cattle. They stopped seeing them as cattle, as living beings, and now these are creatures of trade. But I can put my cattle on your land, and my cattle will multiply, and you get to keep some of those cattle, and I get cattle. It all increases, and that's interest. It's even the word fee comes from peku, pecuniary, cattle. That's the Indo-European root. So that's way back when, our Indo-European roots. And the Egyptians and the Saharans had the same ideas. Fief, there we come to the feudal thing, also comes from fee, cattle, feudalism, chattel, pecuniary, money, property, wealth, cattle. And this is what feudalism does. This is what privatization of people becomes. Slavery. It's like we become slaves, we become objects of money. It's feudalism. So then this is where it gets really this is a tough subject because it's what's the whole interest system has got a grip on the world. Like I already showed you the map, like trillions of dollars in debt. And there are, this is what Judaism says about charging interest. It denounces it thoroughly. The prophet Ezekiel, if one has charged interest or taken increase, shall he then live? He shall not live. If he has done any of these abominations, he shall surely die. His blood shall be upon him. This is like a grave sin. David says the same thing in Psalms. The Proverbs says the same. The Torah says the same. And the Talmud and the Midrash, which are commentaries on the Torah, they emphasize it more, and they don't seem to make any loopholes or any concessions to the horrors of charging interest on money. One who lends money on usury cannot be regarded as reformed until he tear up his account books and effect a complete reform. He who lives by usury in this world shall not live in the world to come. That's the Talmud and the Midrash. This is something that I've been thinking about because this is a horror that's been behind anti-Semitism, and this was one of the driving factors of the Inquisitions of Nazi Germany, and I see this cropping up today. But it's based on something that's happened in history. There was an unholy agreement between Christendom and Judaism. There's what appears to be a loophole in the Torah. It says, do not charge your brother interest on money, food, or anything that can earn interest. You may charge a foreigner interest, but you must not charge your brother interest. This is something that I've avoided for years. I didn't want to touch this because but this is the perfect setup in the Middle Ages or Dark Ages. Jews were very persecuted. They weren't allowed to own property. They lived in ghettos. And the church considered them not worthy of owning property or conducting regular business in society. But Europe was having problems with their wars. They needed to fund them. And it was illegal in Europe, in Christian Europe, to charge interest. It's very clear in Christianity and in Judaism, the Bible, as it is in other world religions. Charging interest is a crime, so it's forbidden. But they wanted to borrow money to fund atrocities in Europe. But then there's this little loophole here. Okay, Christians aren't allowed to lend money to each other, but we could go to the Jews. And the Jews agreed. This is the only living they were allowed to make. They were living in poverty. But they were given the handover of money. You may charge a foreigner interest, but you must not charge your brother interest. This set up a system of paranoia and atrocity in Europe and the world that's going on today. Of course, they became wealthy, and Christian Europe became resentful because the increasing power of the Jews who were originally in the ghettos. Now they have this power because they have this power of lending at interest. Of course, now, like charging interest was illegal till like not too long ago, a couple hundred years ago. Now everybody does it. Now we have huge, powerful Christians in high places, bankers. And even a lot of Muslims are doing it. It was illegal for Muslims, and they've worked around it too. Every one of them finds a little loophole. So I looked this up in the Hebrew. I wanted to get to the bottom of this. Hebrew does have an imperative tense. But I noticed this, just like love your neighbor as yourself, is not imperative tense. The 10 Commandments are not commandments, they're statements too. They're not imperative tense. So this is where we think that we've made grace into law. We've made a description into a law. This is what it literally says. You are not causing interest to your brother. Interest of money, interest of food, interest of anything lent on interest. To a stranger you cause interest, but to your brother you are not causing interest. This is literally, I looked up the tense, causing interest. In the Hebrew it's called hifel. It's not imperative, it's hifel in perfect tense. Hifel indicates causative action. Imperfect indicates action in progress. So it's you are causing interest when you lend to a stranger, not to your familiar. Then all of a sudden I looked at Jesus' teaching here. All of a sudden I realized he's referring exactly to this passage. And we can't get money out of our mind. We think this is talking about money. This is talking about the laws of the universe. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. But if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? What interest is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you hope to receive back, what credit is that to you? For even sinners lend. He uses the word lend. I always wondered why he's used the word lend. For even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much back. But love your enemies, do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the unthankful and the evil. There we are, the unjust, the just and the unjust. It talks about, in the other Gospels that have the same passage, it talks about being like the sun and the rain. They rain and shed light on the just and on the unjust. You give expecting nothing in return, whether it's a good or bad person. So now we're back to the laws of physics. Between two familiar contacting bodies, there's equal and opposite reaction, equal exchange. There's your neighbor, there's your loved one, there's your familiar. For two strange bodies, separated by distance, there's an unequal exchange, energy loss and energy gain between unfamiliar bodies. See, there's that pay it forward thing. There's usury and loss of energy. You can see where these concepts are coming from. In other words, there's equal exchange between familiars. There's interest caused between distant strangers. This happens on the level of particles in physics, and it happens socially. So then something else I was noticing, there's myths and legends all over the world of what separates us from nature and other creatures. The most common one is stealing fire from heaven. You find this all over the Americas, the Native Americans. They have some story of stealing fire from the gods or from heaven and bringing it to mankind. It's an explanation of what separates us from animals, like what other creature uses fire. But this is symbolic of stealing energy from heaven. Like the sun gives expecting nothing in return. We take the energy and we dole it out and sell it. We've taken a principle of heaven or the gods and made it our own. This is possession. And I feel like this was the introduction of this monetary idea in our heads. I looked at in the Greek myth, Prometheus is the one who steals fire from heaven. Prometheus. Prometheus in Greek means forethought. It's related to promise, like promise is a forethought. Latin promissum and prometer. A forethought, of promise, a vow. That's an entering into of debt when you make a promise. And this is something that's it's emphasized in both the Bible and the Quran. Don't make promises, don't make vows, don't enter into debt. But our whole society is built on promises and vows, and we're living in the future, not in the present. To promise is to enter into debt. So I looked at the Genesis story, which is different. It's not about stealing fire, but it's the same principle. It's like this story. Somebody's trying to explain what made us different from other creatures. Like we wear clothes. Humans even have pain in childbirth. Like that's unlike any other creature because our brains are so big. We reap and sow the ground. And that's also another idea of planting a seed and investing. We're trying to get the rewards of our own actions rather than pay it forward. Working by the sweat of our brows. So let's look at the Eden story. The serpent, this one verse kind of reveals it. Eve says in Genesis 3:13, the serpent deceived me. So I looked up serpent. It's all a play on words. Serpent is Nahash, or Nachash. Deceived is Nasha. So I look up Nasha. Nasha means both to deceive and charge interest. Then you look up snake, Nashak. It means both, not snake, but Nashak means both snake bite and charging interest. There's a whole play on words here. This is the same idea. It's an entering into of debt. And this is a concept this is what you hear, like, if anybody who's grown up Christian knows at least something about the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our debts, even as we forgive our debtors. All these words that we use for monetary language are in there. Debt. But I'm saying in the real universe, debt does not exist. It's a belief in the head. And then we have this lending it forward idea. We see both of these. We see everything is paid for in the moment, but there's also, like, you reap what you sow. But then there's this. It's like, which is true? Like Jesus says, for in this, the saying is true, one sows, another reaps. I sent you to reap for that which you have not labored. Others have labored, you have entered into their labors. He gets that from the Old Testament, says the same thing. There's that pay it forward system. It's like you take what you did not work for, and you give what you don't get back from. This is the way the whole universe functions. And this is the last of it. Sorry, I've gone on pretty long here. Chuang Tzu, and this is a famous Taoist sage. He talks about the pivot. And this is what it boils down to. It's like balance. And we all know this when we've tried to ride a bike, or if you're a tightrope walker, or ballet dancer, or whatever, or just plain walking on our feet. The more you try, the more imbalanced you feel, the more you're going to fall. When you stop giving up, trying, controlling credit and debt, or positive and negative balance, then all of a sudden it works out. To me, this is the same principle. But when you do your giving, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your gift may be in secret. This was a statement of Jesus in the Bible. The Quran takes hold of this and goes deeper with it. As soon as you're worried about what the other person's getting or not getting, credit and debt, you go out of balance. See, I have a picture of the Ark of the Covenant here. This is symmetry. See, as long as these two angels, they're called archangels, as long as their focus is on the center, not on each other, when their focus is on the whole, they're in balance with each other. But as soon as one looks up and worries about the other, and they become in competition, then they fall from grace. Like this is the idea of the archangel falling from heaven, becoming the devil, kind of thing. That, all of a sudden it dawned on me that was what was going on there. This is what Chuang Tzu is saying in the pivot. Keep your focus on the pivot. Yes and no pursue each other around the circumference. The pivot of the Tao passes through the center where all affirmations and denials converge. He who grasps the pivot is at the still point from which all movements and oppositions can be seen in the right relationship. Hence he sees the limitless possibilities of both yes and no. Abandoning all thought of imposing a limit or taking sides, he rests in direct intuition. When I was on the road, this guy joined me for a while, and he was trying to teach me Tai Chi. And he actually kept saying, don't let your right hand be aware of your left hand. Like, keep your focus on the Chi in the center. And then it all balances out. And this is where our fall from grace comes from. It's like we see this every day in our lives. Whenever we start trying to control, see, this is the laissez-faire of nature. It's like let it be, and the balance happens automatically. As soon as we try to control, like I'm worrying about what you're getting, you're worrying about what I'm getting, we get out of balance. If I'm doing this in my own body, if I'm worrying about, I become controlling, then I get out of balance. The more I try to balance, the less balance I have. This happens in economics. The more PhD economists we have, the more nations can't balance their budgets. Just look around. What good is it doing this world? We'll study for years. We'll get doctorates in economics. Are we any more balanced? And so basically, people often ask me, well, what kind of system do you suggest replacing the money system with? I don't really. What I'm saying is that it's already here. It's been this way for zillions of years. The gift economy and the perfect justice are already here, except in our minds. And I would say this is what forgiveness is. It's putting away these thoughts. These thoughts of credit and debt. Giving up your debt, which is your belief. And when we do that, then all of a sudden we become balanced with each other, with our economics, and with our environment. So that's it.